undergoing a soft coup, and the idea is to create a whole new set of laws and ignore the existing human rights laws and other laws under the pretext of pandemic preparedness and the biosecurity agenda. The WHO is developing through all its nations, but with the WHO Directorate in the United States in charge, a pandemic treaty and amendments to the existing international health regulations that will remove the human rights protections currently embedded in the IHRs, will enforce surveillance, censorship, get rid of freedom of speech, require governments to censor and only push a single narrative. Also, we will be subject, if they can make this work, to vaccines developed in 100 days, which the organization Stepp is planning to do. And one of the people who founded Stepp was Jeremy Farrar, who is now the chief scientist at the WHO, to bring this forward. Other things that amendments do is to bind the states so they're no longer recommendations but enforceable edicts. Provide a liability shield, get rid of intellectual property rights, move supplies from one country to another, enforce digital passports, and the Director General of WHO can demand that a pandemic or a potential pandemic exists. He can just declare it with no standards, and then countries around the world will have to obey. Also, the WHO will tell you what drugs you can and can't use in your nation once a pandemic is declared. Obviously, the budget will increase. One Health is another part of this. One Health is a concept that was created to enable the WHO, with these documents, to take over jurisdiction of everything in the world by saying that climate change, animals, plants, water systems, ecosystems are all central to health. Also embedded in this concept is a peculiar notion that humans are no longer of greater value than animals.
These warnings that we just keep getting over and over, that's all saying the same thing, that there's this global takeover that's being tried for right now, or that's being attempted. Frustratingly, it just keeps falling on deaf ears. But at some point, everyone is going to have no choice but to just see the writing on the wall. This is so clearly what's going on. And of course, they don't see us as being more important than animals. They want us all gone. And this is a bit of an older clip, but the reason I wanted to start today's video with it is because it's the literal blueprint for their game plan. And looking at something like this 2 years ago, it would have been highly suspicious, but it would have been easy for people to discredit it. It would have been very simple for people to just write it off and say, this is just what this one lady thinks is gonna happen. But look at the massive power grab by the WHO right now. Look at the way they tried to dictate everyone's options and what everyone was required to do during COVID. This stuff is no longer just a theory or an idea being proposed by someone who claims to be more in the know than the rest of us. It's literally a step-by-step plan that we're watching play out in real time. But the reason I wanted to open today's video with this is I felt like this was a really good clip that you could show someone if you could just convince them to watch the first 2 minutes of this video. If they're even remotely paying attention to what's taking place around the world, and I know that a lot of people are not, but if they've only got one eye open, they can see that this stuff is happening right now. All of these countries are implementing digital ID. All these different countries are making their healthcare decisions and creating new policies based on the recommendations from the World Health Organization. There are constantly new laws being implemented in regards to saving the environment. And with the way the citizens are being treated in nearly every Western society, it's become pretty obvious that they view us as being lesser than an animal. But I wanted to add this in the hopes that maybe this would be that one clip that you could show someone that's just 2 or 3 minutes long, that one clip that could show them definitively this is all by design. None of this stuff is happening by chance or by accident. None of this is a coincidence, because I think that the pattern recognition of seeing how this stuff is playing out and how it was clearly orchestrated, I think that's what it's going to take for a lot of people to get their head out of the sand.
Everyone worries about the university indoctrination that happens up here, but it is the crooked foundation of the public school system that makes university indoctrination possible. Everything in school is filtered through the Marxist lens of oppressed versus oppressors. So schools introduce gender ideology, and anyone who's against it is framed as intolerant. They introduce critical race theory, and anyone who's against it is framed as racist. The school introduces feminism, and if you go against it, you're a misogynist or part of the patriarchy. And they introduce socialism, and anyone who's against that is privileged. Now, more often than not, in fact, most of the time, this isn't happening overtly, but it's subtly embedded into curriculum. So, for example, when they teach about slavery, and they do this in elementary school, they teach that the U.S. had slavery, that people were stolen from their homes, that there was abuse, mistreatment, and we all know this. Everyone agrees that slavery was a really bad thing and there shouldn't be slavery. But they don't teach that the United States had banned slavery in 7 states when the rest of the world had only banned it in 7 countries. So in 1776, 90 to 95% of the world was actively practicing slavery. And this was the norm on every continent. And in spite of this, Thomas Jefferson tried to get slavery abolished in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence. And in 1833, England abolished slavery. The United States did in 1865, and the rest of the world followed that example. Africa, Asia. So within proper historical context, the American story is one of liberation, but the Marxist lens requires the oppressed versus the oppressors. So if you were to make these arguments in school, you would be failed, shamed in front of the class, and probably sent to the principal's office, because this is designed to keep America divided so that we could be easily conquered. And to all the Marxists who love to tell me that I'm wrong, you really need to look up the Frankfurt School, as it expanded the ideas of Marxism, developed the oppressed versus oppressor framework, and its aim was to use race, gender, and sexuality to usher in cultural Marxism. And it started infiltrating academia in the 1960s. And the result is what you see today. And our kids and our country deserve so much better.
I'm just going to look something up real quick. How many slaves exist in the world currently? Current global estimates. About 49.6 million people worldwide were in modern slavery on any given day, according to the global estimates of modern slavery. Approximately 28 million of them were in forced labor, and about 22 million were in forced marriage. What country holds the most slaves? According to recent data, India is estimated to have the highest total number of people in modern slavery, about 11 million individuals. China follows with an estimated 5.8 million people in modern slavery. What is the white population of India and China? Apparently that information is not available for India, but I can't imagine that it's a super high percentage. But this does say that there's a very small number of people of European descent. It estimates as much as 150,000 people out of a population of 1.43 billion. In China, even though they're probably lying about the size of their population, according to available data, says 1.41 billion people in total. Over 91% of those individuals are Chinese, and a little over 8.8% is basically the total of all combined other ethnicities. But when you listen to the mainstream narrative, when you listen to the propaganda, they don't just imply, but straight up tell you that white people are the cause or the creators of this slavery issue. And I don't want to go on some rant about slavery. That's not the point that I'm trying to make. The point that I'm trying to make is they'll do anything they can to keep us divided. Instead of letting all the citizens find common ground and a way to commingle with each other, instead of allowing us to slowly become Americans and all of us view ourselves as simply that, they're constantly screaming about this issue that's not even an issue in this country. But the only reason I'm bringing this up, and I know I touched on it a little bit in yesterday's video, if we can't stop listening to this narrative, if we can't stop eating the garbage that they're feeding us, everyone in this country is going to be subjected to slavery. Just go back and listen to what that lady was saying in the first clip. They're going to mandate injections into our bodies that's going to be on a routine schedule. And if you miss one because of your digital ID, you're going to be cut off from your finances. They'll have the state come in and start removing people's kids from their homes because their parents aren't doing the right thing and subjecting their kid to some experimental medical treatment. But you would think in 2025 that we would all be able to see what's going on here. I just wish that people would realize the people they're getting their information from do not have their best interest at heart. They're lying to everyone, and there's a very dark motive behind why they're doing that. We have got to find a way to put this issue to bed and start focusing on unification. If we don't, we are all screwed. Hey, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to drop your theories and your comments in the comments section down below.
Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars is a mysterious 44-page manual dated May 1979, which appears to be a top-secret document that outlines a covert quiet war declared in 1954 by an international elite against the general public. The document first surfaced publicly in the mid-1980s, with the most common story claiming that it was discovered by accident in July of 1986. According to this account, a Boeing aircraft employee bought an IBM copier at a government auction from McChord Air Force Base near Tacoma, Washington, and once he got home and opened it up, he found the manual inside. The document discusses society as an electrical circuit and its citizens as harvestable energy. It describes a process by which the economy can be deliberately subjected to repeated shock through inflation, wage freezes, credit changes, and interest rate hikes, so the public stays in perpetual imbalance and recovery, too busy surviving to effectively resist the elite. In the document, diversion is described as key, with sports, trivial entertainment, gambling, and alcohol being implemented to drain any energy that could fuel rebellion. Traditional family units are to be destroyed by forcing both parents to work and children into daycare from infancy. In this way, the state can become an irreplaceable authority which the people will come to depend on for their own survival. Education is to be transformed into meaningless busy work that produces obedient, technically trained, but intellectually sterile workers. Food, drugs, fluoride, sugar, pharmaceuticals, and recreational substances are to be weaponized to reduce physical and mental vitality. Ultimate surveillance of individual personal lives is to be collected, enabling preemptive neutralization of threats. Traditional religion and absolute morality are undermined so that the state is left as the ultimate authority to appeal to.
This is another one of those examples of you could just claim that this is some guy making all this up, that he created this fake document and released it out to the public to give everyone a fake warning about what the elites are planning. But every single step of that game plan that's talked about in those papers has actually happened already. The only one that hasn't yet, you could say, in a sense, is the direct attack on Christianity. But I was literally reading this morning that in Canada, they're passing new laws that are going to restrict freedom of speech in regards specifically to the ideas proposed in Christianity. There are going to be certain parts of Scripture that they're no longer going to allow people to speak about, claiming that those scriptures promote Islamophobia, homophobia, that they're misogynistic, racist, and this is Canada we're talking about. They're probably going to go back and retroactively charge people who uploaded a sermon on the internet. They're going to start putting handcuffs on street preachers. They're going to start dictating what a pastor can and can't say during a sermon. However, reading Scripture itself, this is all to be expected. The last thing these people want is for anyone to give their life over to Christ and start becoming a decent human being. The more Christianity grows, the less we're going to be accepting of all this garbage that they're feeding us in the media. The more people who are following Christ, the more discernment the world has. And they're not going to be able to manipulate the masses like they want to if every day the majority of the population is waking up and opening the Bible and reading the truth.
Experiments conducted at the National Institute of Mental Health by behavioral researcher John B. Calhoun began in 1947 with the Rockville Rat Colony experiment, in which a quarter-acre outdoor enclosure was built to house wild Norway rats. The rats were protected from predators, had access to fresh air and sunlight, and were provided enough food, water, and nesting material for a population of 5,000. Up until the experiment was ended in 1951, the colony maintained a population of around 200. The rats were all still behaving as natural, healthy rats, maintaining the same sort of violent equilibrium that they do in the wild. During the Rat Universe experiment of 1958 to 1962, where the enclosure was indoors and built much smaller, John Calhoun coined the term behavioral sink as the phenomenon that occurs when rats become overcrowded. They begin to socially withdraw, turn homosexual, and act more aggressive. From 1968 to 1972, they ran the Universe 25 experiment for mice. A 9 by 9 foot metal enclosure was constructed, built to hold about 3,800 mice with unlimited food, water, and nesting supplies. The enclosure was climate controlled, and none of the mice had to be concerned with predators or disease. Universe 25 started with 4 breeding pairs of mice on July 9, 1968. And during the first year, the mice thrived. The population doubled about every 2 months until it peaked on day 560. And for the next 2 years, the population declined. During this 2-year decline, the behavior of the mice changed. Alpha males who were initially dominant became passive and no longer defended their territory. Other males became hyper-aggressive and attacked without provocation. And many of the males fell into the category known as the beautiful ones. These males exclusively spent their time alone, avoiding all social and sexual behavior. They obsessed over grooming themselves and appeared to be the most physically healthy. Overall, the males lost interest in having sex with females, and the females lost interest in being mothers. They began showing aggression toward their offspring, including killing and eating them, and their bodies began miscarrying. Even though the population dropped and the living space increased, the mice did not recover. Calhoun interpreted the reason for this collapse to be the result of a spiritual death, which then directly led to a physical death. He wrote that the first death is that of the spirit. Their spirit has died. They are no longer capable of executing the more complex behaviors compatible with species survival. Calhoun was saying that if you diminish a creature's spirit, it will lose its survival instincts. He saw how this would affect life for humans and said that the establishment would have to change in order to avoid social breakdown in crowded human environments.
We need better establishment to allow interrelationships to protect us from too many contacts, but to allow us for those contacts which we do engage in to be more meaningful for our own lives and for meaningful to others in a compassionate sense of each of us being involved in helping the other to fulfill his role. We'll have many more roles, and this is where the notion of compassion comes in, is helping each of us, helping others to fulfill their programs for development.
Studies have shown that people who live in large cities are less happy and have less meaningful lives than those who live in small towns. For many of us, it is no surprise to learn that living like pets in large, crowded cities is unhealthy for humans. But for the establishment, it's big business. Studies in China and the USA show that residents living in more populated areas spend more money and consume more products. This is because most social interactions become comparative and competitive, more about having the same things as your neighbors and less about meaningful friendships.
And just the fact that they performed this study all the way back then and had that takeaway when it was over. Yet their great plan to save the world is to cram all of us into these 15-minute smart cities. That ought to tell you all you need to know about the people in charge. And how do they describe these 15-minute smart cities? They make it sound like it's some great idea. You're going to be able to walk anywhere in 15 minutes. You won't even need a car. Everything that you need will be supplied to you, easily accessible, food, water, shelter, all that stuff's going to be provided. They're going to use AI to control everything, so there won't even be a need for people to have jobs. They're literally trying to force us into the same environment that these mice were in during this experiment. And it's pretty obvious that they're hoping for the same outcome. And if we allow them to pull this off, they will probably get what they're hoping for.
So, last night, we were literally nearly killed on the motorway. I'm not even exaggerating. I can literally barely move my neck this morning. And I need to talk to you guys about what actually happened with this. You see, this wasn't about a bad driver. Another car tried to change lane yesterday. Normal situation, you know, it happens thousands of times a day. But the scary part was, the driver tried to correct it. You know, the driver tried to take control and the car forced itself back. You could literally see it. The steering wheel was fighting the driver. This wasn't human error. This was lane correction. This was AI that's built into the car. And instead of protecting the people, it pushed the car straight into us. Let that sink in, you know, the system that is marked as safety literally nearly killed us last night. And before anyone jumps in the comments, yes, these systems, they override human steering in the manuals, obviously. But not a lot of people know about it. And last night, we nearly lost our lives because of it. Your car can literally decide that you're wrong, even if you're trying to avoid a crash. That is literally terrifying, because when a human makes a mistake, you know, you can react, you can adjust. But when the software inside the car makes a decision in a split second and it gets it wrong, you don't get a second chance. Like, I need the people to understand right now that we are being put into semi-autonomous vehicles without proper warning, you know, without proper education, you know, and without any real conversation about what happens when these systems fail. You know, if a human did that, they would be held accountable. When the AI does it, it's just an accident, you know, no blame, no responsibility. I mean, listen, I'm not anti-technology. I'm just anti-blind trust, you know. If you can drive a modern car, you need to know this stuff. Because last night, literally, last night, lane correction built into the cars nearly killed us. So yeah, last night didn't scare me because of a driver. It scared me because a machine decided that we could nearly end our lives.
I think this is a much bigger problem than people realize. I got my wife a 2025 Kia Carnival minivan. This thing has lane assist, and if you're driving it for too long, it will literally wear your arms out because it wants you to hug the inside of the lane. And it's almost caused me to have an accident twice. About 3 or 4 months ago, I was on the highway going about 65 miles an hour. There was a car directly in front of me, and this thing has the adaptive cruise control, so you can just set your speed, put it at 80 if you want it, and if the car in front of you slows down to 60, it'll automatically slow down for you, and it's supposed to keep the same distance between you and the car in front of it that you set it for. But I was on a straightaway, and the car directly in front of me, who was slowing me down because of the adaptive cruise control, decided to go into the turning lane on the left side of the road and turn and go across the opposing lane. When this car entered the turning lane, it slowed my van down by maybe 5 or 10 miles an hour. And then they came to a complete stop, and it slammed the brakes on and nearly threw me into the windshield. And this car was not even directly in front of us anymore. I can only assume that this system malfunctioned. But it slammed the brakes on so fast, so hard, I literally walked around for like 3 days with a sore collarbone from the seatbelt. If a system can malfunction to that degree, it doesn't need to be implemented. It shouldn't even be in these vehicles. And I totally get that there's probably situations where people's lives were saved because of those systems. But at the very least, you should have the ability to turn those functions off if you don't want to use them. At least, thankfully, you can turn off the lane correction feature. If you couldn't, I wouldn't be able to drive the thing. But there's been a handful of times that I was in bumper-to-bumper traffic going through downtown Nashville at about 55 miles an hour, and a car in the lane beside me, who's perfectly centered in their lane, they decide they're going to do about 70, and they blow past me and nearly take my side view mirror off because my mirror is essentially in their lane. The thing acts like it wants your tires riding on the line. I just don't understand. How is that a safety feature?
Hey everybody, here I am in Sherwood, Connecticut, on Sherwood Island. Here's the little woodchuck hall. Shirley Troubadour asked a question about why Gates and China are being allowed to buy up all the farmland in our country. And I'm going to tell you something that I had an experience with. I spent many years, about 20 years, suing the factory farms, the big hog farms, and the big chicken producers like Tyson and Bo Pilgrim and Frank Perdue. But Smithfield Foods was the biggest pork producer. And Smithfield came into the state of North Carolina. They built a slaughterhouse that could process 30,000 pigs a day. And then they had a partner named Wendell Murphy, who was in the state senate, and he passed 28 laws in the North Carolina state senate making it illegal to sue a factory farm. He left and went into partnership with Smithfield, created a way to raise pigs instead of raising them on farms, to raise them in warehouses called Murphy 1100s. And they dropped the price of pork from 60 cents a pound to 2 cents a pound. It put out of business all 28,000 independent hog farmers in the state of North Carolina, and it replaced them with 2,200 factories, all of them either owned by Smithfield or contracted to Smithfield. The only farmers who could stay in business were farmers who signed that contract with Smithfield to mortgage their homes, to put those big hog sheds, the Murphy 1100s, on their property, and then they lose all control. They become serfs on their own land. Smithfield dictates all their farming practices. It gives them the food. It delivers the piglets, picks up the grown animals, and brings them to slaughter. They put out of business 28,000 farmers, and they control now 80% of the hog production in North Carolina. Because they dropped the price in North Carolina, Iowa had to adopt the same system, had to cave in to Smithfield. They ended up taking control of 80% of the hog production in our country. Then they sold themselves to China. So now China owns all that hog production in America, and it controls our landscapes. And that's the end of Thomas Jefferson's vision of an American democracy rooted in tens of thousands of independent freeholds, each one owned by family farmers, each with a stake in our system of government. And that's why all of this industrial agriculture not only gives us substandard food, but they're also taking control of our landscapes, and that is a huge threat to American democracy.
Not only are they controlling 80% of the hog production in the United States, but they're essentially doing the same thing with beef and with chicken. And they don't even want us eating meat. So how hard is it going to be for most people to find meat when they decide to just shut that stuff down? And there's barely going to be anyone around at that point who even knows how to produce these animals. But there are ways around it. I live in a very small town in rural Kentucky. Most of this area is completely covered with the Amish community. I can drive in 15 to 20 minutes in 3 different directions and find locally raised pork, beef, or chicken. And with their depopulation agenda, even while we are getting access to this meat that they'll likely eventually just take away from us, who knows what we're ingesting every time we eat some of this stuff. They're trying to force all these farms now to put Bovaer in their feed so that the cows don't pass gas as much. And you can get online and watch video after video of cows just dropping dead out in the middle of a field. Does anyone honestly think that there's just no way possible that that's going to have a negative impact on the people who are actually consuming that meat? And again, I know that country living is not for everyone, but just think about how bad it's going to be when you're in a city with millions of people in a small congested area and suddenly the meat supply runs out.
One cyber attack can cut off food for millions of Americans, and that already happened. In 2021, a single cyber attack shut down about 20% of U.S. beef processing overnight. Prices jumped, supply tightened, and the system barely held. And here's the problem. The system is still built the exact same way. Today, 4 corporations control most of U.S. beef processing, not the ranchers, not the local communities. 4 centralized choke points. That means one attack, one power failure, or one logistics disruption hits millions of people immediately. Not because we don't have cattle, but because we don't have a decentralized way to process and move food in. Regional plants were shut down, local supply chains were labeled inefficient, and ranchers were pushed out even as food prices climbed. That's not efficiency, that's fragility. And a country that can't reliably feed its people is not sovereign. That's why ranchers are building the American Rancher Alliance. Producer-owned, regionally distributed, built to decentralize food processing and distribution before the next disruption hits. Because the solution to centralized risk is decentralized ownership.
This sounds like a great idea. I think this needs to be at the top of our priority list. What's everyone going to do if China just suddenly decides that they're not going to produce this stuff anymore? Are we all just going to eat Bill Gates' fake lab-grown meat? China clearly isn't our best friend. For them to own 80% of the hog production in the United States, they literally have their hands on our nutrition. And they don't believe in caution whenever it comes to scientific research. They don't believe in restrictions. And that's in regards to their own people in their own country. Don't think for a second that they have any concern for what happens to us over here. Who knows what they may start adding to the meat in the future. You just can't trust them. But I think this needs to be a major focus. With everything that's been exposed about the food industry in the last couple of years, all the videos we keep seeing popping up all over Instagram and TikTok showing what's actually being put into our food, making sure that my family's food comes from a reliable, trustworthy source has become one of my top priorities. I only purchase meat from local butcher shops, which a lot of people don't have the option to do. And again, that's one of the big reasons you need to get out of these cities. And up until a few years ago, I was raising my own hogs. Right before I started this YouTube channel, I messed my back up at work, and that's kind of what led me to start posting these videos. I was kind of stuck in the house and not able to really get out and do anything. And wouldn't you know it, it was about at that point that all my hogs decided that the fence just wasn't going to contain them anymore. And my back was so messed up, I couldn't keep going outside every other day and trying to rein them back in and get them back in the pen. I reached a point where I had to just kind of throw my hands up and say, I can't do this anymore. But if you live in an area where you don't have access to a local butcher shop, go to this website and get involved in the American Rancher Alliance. You can either go there and join the movement or become a producer yourself. They even give you access to petitions and stuff that you could sign to help enact new laws to make our food safer. But guys and gals, I'm going to go ahead and end the video right there. I hope you enjoyed these clips we watched together today. I just wanted to touch on a few other topics today just to change things up a bit. I don't like when it feels like I'm talking about the same thing every day, and this food issue is something that's a really big deal to me. You literally are what you eat, and we just can't let them force us to start eating lab-grown meat. But God willing, I'll be back tomorrow with another video. I hope you come back to join me. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to drop your theories and your comments in the comment section down below. But guys and gals, I hope everyone has a great, safe, fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you all tomorrow.